Welcome to another episode of Fans in Motion, the podcast that you didn't know that you needed, but now you do. Joining me is my steady sidekick. If I was Batman, he would be my Robin. If I was Cher, he would be Sunny. Is old Brent Walter. Kindly enough to make it with us here with Tim.
I ain't
Uh,
making nothing with you.
oh, you wish you could there, Robin.
No, it's sunny. I sing about as well as he does too.
And ski. Um,
Yeah,
but
you can
joining
ski.
and joining Brent and I on the Fans of Motion podcast, the ultimate Night Ranger podcast, is podcaster, collector, author
Extraordinaire.
extraordinaire, Mr. Tim Durling, who has I've been on his podcast, but hey, welcome to ours, buddy.
Thanks for having me, guys. This is a real honor. Really enjoy watching. So yeah, it's cool to actually be on the podcast. So do I need to recite a lyric or anything?
Yeah,
You know, yeah,
do it.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
You know what I noticed today when I had the dog out? It really is cold as December.
There you go.
It usually is in December.
Funny thing, yeah.
So for those that don't know that Tim has a podcast. Look at this, Tim's Vinyl Confessions, where when you have vinyl and you have sinned, you can go and be cleansed. But I've been on, I think, the podcast twice. I think just recently we did the 40 Years in a Night. And previously, I don't remember if there was
that was way back in February, and yeah, we just had a general discussion about Fans in Motion and about Night Ranger, and of course, in between that time, I've actually gotten to see them. Thanks in large part to Josh and
there we
meet
go.
and greet, and yeah, good stuff.
So yeah, it was. I can guarantee it was an excellent episode. So go check out both of those and all of Tim's other episodes there on Tim's Vinyl Confessions. Now, Tim has also written this book. Look at that. Look at that. An adventure in 8-tracks, Unspooled. And that's what we're here today to talk about. We're going to talk about Night Ranger 8-tracks and a little bit of 8-tracks in general, just because it's an interesting topic. And and a lot of people don't know that. Yeah, I mean, Night Ranger does have 3 releases on the old 8-tracks. So yeah, let's do the deep dive into the art of collecting music and memorabilia, the grime and the gunk and of crate digging, and maybe a little bit of education too. That's a good little hype sticker you got there too.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I can't take any credit for the design. That's my good friend Matt Phillips that designed this one for me, and it looks way more pro than I feel most of the time.
So I'd done a little, quick research and written some notes out just about the history of 8-tracks. That's where I went right before we started recording. I went upstairs to get that, and literally the dog ate my fucking homework. That was on the floor. Yeah, Lobby. There's actually damn good proof of it. So anyways,
He was running down the steps. I gotta look like I made some effort.
Well, I open I go upstairs and I open the door, and he turns around and looks at me and gives me that look like he knows. But I don't know what it is yet, right? I'm thinking I see the coat on the floor, right? So he's went and grabbed my coat and took it down. All right, I expect that. So I go to grab the notes. I go in the kitchen and bam, scattered all over the floor, eaten and shredded and whatever. But anyways, what I had written on here was 8-tracks. Looks, and Tim, you can obviously chime in if some of this information is wrong, but 8-tracks peaked sales wise in the US in 1978. So that kind of gives you an idea of, where the top of the mountain was for 8-tracks. Now, my collecting life and, music listening, life, 8 tracks were already in the past. I was born in 1977. Now, I was getting, music bought for me at 3 years old in 1980. Billy Joel Glasshouse is on vinyl, Huey Lewis and the Cars and Night Ranger in 1983, all on vinyl. 8 track, even back then, didn't cross my mind. The first memory I kind of have of 8 track is two things. One, my aunt's nice big stereo that she had, right? She got for Christmas had an 8 track player, and I knew cassettes, I knew vinyl, but what's this damn other, contraption that's on there? And then I remember maybe being like 10 years old, 11 years old, 1987, 88. We were having a yard sale, and one of my aunts put out a big box of 8 tracks for 25 cents a track, 8 track, and not a single soul wanted them. Like, and even I never went back and wanted to go through them and take them because it was just so ancient. So 8 tracks really never meant much to me. Tim, were you ever at the point when you were, buying music that 8 track was your number one go to? And if so, what was one of your first 8 tracks you ever bought?
It was never like it was never a go-to for me. I didn't really start um getting into actually buying music as opposed to just record, getting blank Memorex tapes and recording songs off the radio, right? Till I was about 11, 12, so 85, 86. But I did have one 8 track that I got for Christmas in 1979. I was born in 74, and it was the Muppet movie soundtrack. So that was the one 8 track I owned, and we didn't even have a player in the house. So the only time I could listen to it is when I went to my grandparents' house because they had one of those big floor sized cabinets. The turntable, is on tracks and it comes out and it had the 8 track and the radio and the big TV sat on top of it. So that's the only place I could play it. And I think within a week of playing it, it wound up inside of it because they're very strange construction in these things. But I am old enough to remember like my older cousins having stuff like the Cars first album and Blondie, and I'm pretty sure Back in Black. Somebody had Back in Black way back then, but I don't remember when people stopped having them. I just all of a sudden everybody that was in kind of in my family, everybody bought cassettes, even the grown-ups. Like it just became so much simpler and smaller, and they started putting, new cars started coming with cassette decks in them already. So they just kind of went by the wayside. So they were never my preferred format. It was strictly in a collecting thing. And you're right. By the end of the '80s, there was no value in these. I remember being in secondhand stores and seeing, they must have been old stock that record stores would have had, still sealed and marked down to 50 cents. There's just no market for them at this point. So of course, I wish now I'd have bought a ton of them, if they were good rock albums. But
now, Brent, did you? I mean, I already probably can answer that you weren't a 8 track guy, more of a vinyl guy. But what's your 8 track stories? And I know you probably bought some to collect.
No, I bought some to listen to.
Ooh.
See, my parents both all their cars had 8 tracks in them. So my first 8 track that I purchased with my own money was Loverboy Get Lucky.
Now, what year that? 80, something like that?
That was 80. Yeah. So the reason I bought it on 8 track was because we could listen to it in the car, and my mom liked it, so I knew I could listen to it in the car. That backfired on me because when my mom and dad had to go to Atlanta, she hijacked my Loverboy 8 tracks and took them with her for a week, and I didn't have anything to listen to. But no, my dad would buy 8 tracks as a kid. I can remember going to there was a local chain store here called Swallens, but I mean, I was born in '68, so any store. I mean, do you guys remember them even in the stores at all?
Vaguely. I remember them being behind like plastic dividers, right, and you had to ask someone to unlock them.
But if the store was what's the word, technologically up to date, they had the plexiglass in front and they had holes in them. You could stick your hand.
Yes, that's what I mean.
You could stick your hand inside of it, but you couldn't pull it out, and you could
right,
look at it,
yeah,
and you would drop it, and it would be on a conveyor belt, and it would take it to the register.
Yeah,
and
I vaguely remember that the plexiglass, and seems to me I remember them coming in a cardboard, probably an anti-theft thing, but they were like in a cardboard. Not like a
not
CD
a long box,
almost like a CD long box, almost, but you could see them. It was clear, but the rest of it was, I think it must have been an anti-theft thing. But that is way back in the memory bank.
Yeah, and that was for the store. That was the stores that didn't have that conveyor belt, function.
So was this the reason why for this was because they were smaller and could be stolen, unlike maybe a vinyl record?
Right.
Probably. I mean, it's the same reason why they had, cassettes. Remember, you guys remember going into a store to get a cassette and they'd have that plastic thing on them that they had to take off at the counter for? Mm-hmm. Same thing. It was an anti-theft.
When I was a kid and I worked in a record store, all we had to do was flex them and bend them and they'd pop out. And people were stealing them left and right. And they're like, you got to keep it better. I'm like, this anti-theft thing is not working for us. But the 8-tracks, I remember being so pissed as a kid because anything I had on vinyl that I found at a garage sale for $0.25 on 8-track, and if my parents did let me listen to Rock and Roll Over, the songs wouldn't be in the same order.
That's right.
And then you had that one song that's going to fade out.
Yep.
Fade back in and sing the same lyric over again. It's kind of like when you're watching TV and they leave you on going to a commercial, and they come back and play that same freaking scene again. That used to drive me nuts. So I probably had 10, 15 8-tracks in a 1983. I got a turntable stereo system with a dual cassette deck, an 8-track player, and a turntable. And the 8-track player, you could record on it. So I was in heaven because I was going to all the garage sales, buying those up for $0.25 and recording over them because they were. If you could record on it, it's not like a cassette where you punch a tab out. You could just stick it in and record over. And what the beauty of that was,
I knew you could record over them, but I didn't know how.
Yeah, you just put it in, hit record, and it would just dub over top of it.
That's why my Love Gun 8-track has a baseball game over part of it.
There you go. And the beauty of that is it didn't pause for the track. It just, and the song would keep going.
Automatic. Okay.
Yeah. And so you didn't have that fade out. And if you were, I got to the part where I'd figure out how much time was on that tape and I started rearranging the songs. So I'd only have one song do it versus 4 songs doing it.
There's a reason they did that. There's a reason for the dividing the songs, and there's a reason for them not being in the right order. It's to keep the 4 programs roughly the same length because you could not rewind 8 tracks. You could only fast forward them. So if you were lucky, let's say you only liked 3 songs on an album. Well, if you were lucky, they were all in the same program, but they probably weren't.
Now, my question for you is, which I don't know the answer to this, and I try to tell people even on this show, that I don't know why they call them 8 tracks because there's technically 4 tracks. The head just moves up and down.
Yep.
And in 4 different positions.
Yep.
But I don't know why it's called an 8-track.
Yeah, to the best of my knowledge, Brent, it's simply because they're 4 tracks and they're stereo, 4 times 2.
Okay.
That's, to the best of my knowledge, why they're called 4 tracks.
I used to know some of this, and
there's a chapter in the book that someone talks about exactly how they work, and it is literally, you've got your tape like this on program 1, and when you switch to program 2, it makes a quarter turn, and then it makes another quarter turn, and so as thin as the tape is, Imagine splitting that up into 4. That's your complete program. So your sound quality wasn't going to be there. And also eventually, that's why you get the crosstalk where you'd start to hear 2 songs at the same time, because you'd hear the corresponding song on another program, because the tape is, everything's not tight, right? It's just, it's
See,
an odd.
our heads always went up and down.
Okay.
So because I'd open up the flap and I'd get the alcohol in the swab and I'd clean it and I'd hit it and I'd watch it go up and down. So I don't know. I didn't know anything about any heads going. I mean, was that earlier or?
It might have been earlier, but I mean, that is something that you will find with 8 tracks. Eventually, over time, they'll start to, you'll have 2 songs going at the same time, because you've got the corresponding, if you're 6 minutes into program 1, you'll get the song that's 6 minutes into program 2. That's the other thing. Like, if you want to skip to the song, it doesn't automatically skip to the beginning of the next program. It skips to where you're at. If you're 3 minutes in, well, you're 3 minutes in, you're probably going to end up in the middle of a song. And yeah, there was that little bit of repeating when it would fade out. I guess that's so you didn't miss any of it, so none of it got lost. But what you kind of alluded to it, why 8 tracks were popular in the first place was because of the portability.
Right.
You could listen to them in your car. If you wanted to listen to a particular album and not wait for a song you like to happen to come on the radio, you wouldn't know when, you could with an 8 track. So that was why it was so popular. And it totally makes sense that 1978 was the peak year. That totally makes sense. I wouldn't disagree with that, because the majority of 8 tracks, I think most people, if they know about 8 tracks, they think of them as a 70s thing.
Yeah. And then cars started putting cassette decks in.
Yeah.
Which, no need for the 8 track. It's no different than when the CDs came in and they started.
But the interim thing, and I've got a picture of it in here. The interim thing, which I used to think was pretty cutting edge, was the old cassette adapter.
Yeah.
Where you, hold on, I know I got it in here somewhere, right here. Old Sparkomatic cassette adapter. So it's shaped like an 8 track, but you can lay a cassette down in there, plug it into an 8 track player, and it'll play your cassette.
Totally remember those.
Yeah.
And the same deal with the CDs. If you had a portable CD player, you'd plug it into your headphone jack. You plug that cassette
My first CD player was one of those, and you hit anything resembling a bump, and it would, all of a sudden it would skip, and it might be a minute before it came back on.
You're exactly right. Now, I will tell you, I remember my dad's portable 8 track, because we had the big stereo where you open the lid, put the turntable down there, and the 8 track was its own component. And I remember that would get offline, and he'd open it up, and there'd be a little screw, and he'd screw it, and it would move the head. So we'd put an 8 track in until, and I learned a lot from just watching my dad as a kid.
Did you ever see him stick a matchbox or a matchbook underneath, or to steady it? I've seen people do that too, because it would start to, like, the 8 track would, half of the 8 track hung out of the player.
Oh, okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Because if it got loose,
just like putting a penny on top of your stylus in the record player.
I had to put on that JCPenney one. I had to put a popsicle stick underneath of it.
Yeah, there was so much.
Take it apart
before you could actually listen to anything. There was so much work that had to be done, and to this day, like, there are collectors of these things that listen to these actively, and it takes so much maintenance. You've got to clean the machines, you've got to oil them, you've got to open the tapes up, figure out how to open them without damaging the labels, and re-spool them. Sometimes you end up, there's a story in the book about that, with something called a coffee can tape, which is, people will bring there's folks that own this repair shop. They'll bring them like a coffee can full of tape. Somewhere in there's an 8 track. Can you fix this for me? Because there's a lot of tape inside, your average 8 track. And then if you get like a double live album on one tape, there's even more tape. So it's an odd format for me to get obsessed with. But I think that the obsession part comes when I realized that the record clubs kept making 8 tracks almost all the way through the 80s. For whatever reason, that blew my little mind when I found that out sometime in the mid 90s. I had no idea. I always thought 81, 82, you just didn't see them anymore. But that was not the case with if you were a member of the record club's RCA Music Service, or more popularly Columbia House. I'd say Columbia House had to be the most popular, based on all the used things I've seen. Way more Columbia House, and that's in any format.
Yeah.
And good.
And the one thing like I see popping up all the time on different record forums are the reel-to-reel tapes. You know, those were pretty much non-existent that I don't remember seeing as a kid.
Those are like beyond 8 tracks.
Yeah.
You know, like they're like the next frontier of rare. I had no idea. I always thought reel-to-reel was simply for recording. I didn't know, like, I don't just mean recording in a studio, but like answering machines or, you know, things like that. I had no idea that you could buy albums on reel-to-reel. They came in these boxes a little bit bigger than a CD. And surprisingly, like the 8 tracks, Columbia House manufactured those later, because if you go on Discogs, you'll find albums like Yes 90125, Van Halen 1984, Steve Perry's Street Talk on reel-to-reel. Now, they're not for sale, but they existed. I don't know if there are any Night Ranger ones. I mean, it would be the first 2 albums, if any, but yeah, I don't have any reel-to-reels because they have not come down in price. Every once in a while I'll go on eBay and I'll look, and they'll have like Kiss ones or Aerosmith or Alice Cooper, but they're always $250 starting out. So it's just not worth it.
No, but it's cool.
And plus, I know me. Once I had one, then I'd have a problem, right? So
now, what was the big deal with like the quadraphonic 8 tracks? I mean, was that like the first time you were able to get like a surround sound?
I think that was something that they pushed from about 1972 to 75. So it's a very small window and you had to have a special player for them. You couldn't just use a regular 8-track player. I actually first read about those in one of Dale Sherman's books, Collector's Guide to Alice Cooper. I didn't know anything about them, but apparently in some cases there are musical parts that you could hear on these quad 8 tracks that you couldn't hear just listening to the regular album. I think $1 Billion Babies is one of those that has, you know, extra parts, but it never really caught on. Those really only lasted about 4 years.
I would think that the record company probably really liked 8 tracks because there can't be a lot of money in this, right? Plastic.
I would think that they'd be very, very easy to throw together in a mass, like assembly line.
And you don't have to worry about liner notes. I mean, listen, it's a sticker and a sticker. And it's just amazing too that, I mean, I guess, I don't know if things were just different then, but you know, it's like even as a kid, when I bought music, it was part of my collection. I took a little care of it, right? And I liked how it looked in the cassette rack and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
And 8 tracks just always look like shit. You know, I mean,
you definitely didn't buy them to admire the cover art because you know, it's small. You know, the cassettes were smaller, but these were small. You couldn't look at it while you were playing them because, like I said, half of it was in the player, half of it was stuck out. Back cover art, you might as well forget about that. Unless
those bubbles.
Unless, and then if they were left out in the sun or anything, like, you'd get the bubbling. That happens very, very frequently. But you know, in the 70s, A&M put out probably the best looking 8 tracks, because I've got a couple Nazareth ones. If you've got Styx ones, they actually have some of the back cover art on them. So they actually put some money into the the packaging. But again, you can't look at that when it's playing. So I don't know. It's the portability that won out. It wasn't for it wasn't for the cosmetic look of it.
This is 1981. Hank Williams Jr.
And Hank Jr., I mean, if you were a fan of like country music in the 80s, your favorite artist all the way up through 1988, because I think Wild Streak was Hank's album in 88. That's on 8-track. All of those albums came out.
Well, you know, if you're listening to old Hank Williams Jr., you're probably a little bit behind on the times, you know.
Well, that's the cliche, but I mean, there's got to be some truth there, because I mean, all the George Strait albums that came out, Alabama and Reba and Randy Travis, even Ricky Skaggs, that stuff's all on 8-track, and all of those albums came out, because sometimes with the rock bands, they either didn't. There's a point where they stopped, or there are gaps. There's one that came out, the next one didn't, and then the next one did come out on 8-track. There's some weird, like, it would have been really frustrating if that was your preferred format.
1981 RCA Music Service under license. I do have a couple other. I do have a lot of 8-tracks, but I don't know where that case is. So these were ones I had sitting out. These are all manufactured by RCA Record Club. Major Moves, which was released in 1984, and another one from 81, Hank Williams Jr. Rowdy. So here's an 84.
Yeah.
You know, but I mean,
yeah, and the thing is, you bring up a good point. By this time, all of them looked the same as far as like on the record clubs, because if the album came out on RCA Music Service, which was later to become BMG Music Service, all of them looked like they were on RCA. Likewise, all of the Columbia House ones looked like they were on CBS, no matter what the originating label was. So there's a generic look to them once they head into what I call RCO territory, which is record club only. My parents used to have that Elvis record. I remember that well from being a kid.
You remember what the cassettes looked like that came from Columbia House?
They looked awful.
Yeah, they'd have those 2 pink lines.
Yeah, I've got
on
a couple.
The spine.
Yeah, I got a couple April Wine ones. Ugliest looking cassette design.
Yeah. All
they
white
didn't look like
paper.
In Canada, they look different, but the U.S. Columbia House ones were ugly.
Horrible. And I'll tell you, when they went right around 1987, when they started issuing what looked like what you buy in the store, people would try to bring them into me.
Yeah.
And I turned it over. I'm like, no, this is
manufactured by Columbia House.
I said,
under
yeah.
license.
I said, it's a CRC here.
Yeah.
So I said, that's Columbia Record Club. We don't sell that.
Yeah,
I bought it from here. I'm like, you did not buy that from here.
You did not buy that. If it's got 6 letters and 6 numbers and a letter in brackets, you did not buy it.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't stupid. It was funny because people would come in all the time and asking for 8-tracks, and they were always country. Yeah, I would tell them, you have to join a record club to get them. We can't order it for you. Well, my friends got it. I'm like, yeah, you probably got it through a record club.
Right. That's the only way. Yeah, around like 82, most of the way through 82, a lot of the albums still came out on 8-track, but not in very big quantities. But like by 83, it was really, really curtailed. So I don't know why they kept making them. That's the thing. I don't know why they kept making them. It's a weird thing. And in Canada, Columbia House stopped making 8-tracks in 1984. They didn't go as long as they did in the US.
I mean, you know, and who knows? I mean, it could be something where, and again, I'm just making up stuff to where, okay, in order to like keep a contract, right? You've got to press 50,000 copies of Night Ranger Midnight Madness. Well, how many are we going to be able to get rid of on vinyl? 40, or say 30,000. Well, we can probably do 15,000 on cassette. Well, where we got to print the other 5,000 so we can keep this contract.
Yeah.
You know, are they, you know, can we get rid of another 5,000 cassettes? Probably not. Can we get rid of another 5,000 vinyl? Maybe, but they're going to take up space and storage. Print them on 8-track. We can at least probably move, you know, a few thousand, and the ones that we don't move, they don't take up much space. You could look at, you know, that could be some reason.
Yeah, you know, I really wanted. I really was hoping I could track somebody down that worked at one of the record clubs back then and kind of say, look, talk me through this process. When somebody submits their card, you had to submit your card, and the letter would determine what format you wanted. And, you know, would somebody look at it and go, oh, you know, this is the 5th person this week that wants Van Halen 5150 on 8-track. I guess we'll have to run a few off. Like, I have to think that the longer it went along, the pressings just got so, even for million-selling albums, just got so very low that that's why, that's why Brent was able to sell Creatures of the Night for what he sold it for,
and it
because there just aren't that many of them.
It was in beautiful condition. I didn't want to get rid of it, but it was one of those things where when Kiss Online's releasing a limited edition of vinyl for $250, you got to pull that money from somewhere.
I'd have kept the 8-track myself. Well, that's me.
It was, but that 8-track had sat in a box for 20 years.
I know.
And because I didn't want to damage it.
Yeah.
And I was going to add earlier, the one thing some 8-tracks, I don't know what they call it. On cassette, it's like a little felt head behind the tape.
Yeah.
But 8-tracks, that sucker, depending on the material they use, it would just break down and disintegrate.
Oh yeah, they just deteriorate. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the little yeah.
Right. And
this one doesn't even have it, I don't think.
I got real good, like we'd buy them at the yard sales, and my dads would do that, and I got real good at opening them up and sliding a new one in there. It's just what I bring to the table.
Yeah, and it's not easy. It's really not.
You figure out real fast. Do you open it from the top or do you open it from the bottom?
Well, and then every company had a different mold, like for putting them together. Like they're different shapes slightly.
Yeah, and some were snap-ins and some were screws.
Yeah.
The screws are the ones I always did. So
yeah.
Here is an unopened Gary Stewart. You like some good country honky tonk? There you go. So nothing too crazy. It would come with like a cardboard slip case, and then it's just wrapped in shrink.
Yeah, the slip case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the thing is about Kiss, like, there are probably people that collect Kiss 8-tracks that don't collect 8-tracks by anybody else, but they collect Kiss. So when you've got those, like Creatures was the last one to come out on retail. But Lick It Up and Animalize came out on Columbia House. And I'm still kicking myself for not buying Animalize off eBay when I had the chance. It was buy it now, because I hate bidding. I hate bidding and waiting to see if I get outbid. This was a buy it now. It was like $250. And I'm sitting there going, how can I justify this? And, I wish I'd just pulled the trigger on it, because then I would only need Creatures and Lick It Up now, because I got them all through the Elder, which is not too easy to find either. But so we should we bring this around to Night Ranger so we don't lose everybody?
Yeah, we lost them 5 minutes in. So here is starting back in the Night Ranger career. This is what I got.
Yeah.
Rubicon on 20th Century Fox Records 8-track. I don't know if that's the original.
Yeah, the slipcase.
So 20th Century Records, wasn't that? I think that was affiliated with Casablanca, if I'm not mistaken. I think there was a connection there.
Maybe.
I don't know. I mean, the only 20th Century record I had as a kid was the story of Star Wars.
Yeah, that's a pretty popular one for that. Yeah.
And
now this slipcase is Canada.
GRT of Canada. See, they may have been the distributor in Canada for 20th Century.
I'm seeing if there's anything on the back here that mentions Canada.
And that might not even be the original slipcase.
It may not be. I don't know.
Yeah, sometimes, like I said, if you get a Kiss one in a Casablanca, you've probably got the right one. Mm-hmm. Or there used to be, there's a chapter in this book where I talk about what I call naked 8-tracks. And that's not nearly as fun as it sounds. But at some point, like Atlantic Records did this, Warner Brothers, I guess all the Warner associated labels did it. But you'd see ones like this, right? Those are legitimate 8-tracks. But at that time, for some reason, they put out slipcases, just like DVDs and Blu-rays. But the slipcase would have the cover art on it. Well, you talk about taking care of stuff. The slipcases usually got tossed. So then you've got all these 8 tracks that don't have any cover art on them, but they are legitimate 8 tracks. Sometimes there'd be artwork on the slipcase and on the tape, sometimes not. Let me show you a couple of my prized possessions that do not have artwork on the actual art. These are 2 of the rarest ones I have. Band that people may have heard of. A little band called Yesterday and Today. They shortened their name eventually. But this is their first album. And there's no artwork on the... And I was lucky enough to find a copy where somebody had kept the slipcase.
Wow.
So that was on London Records, as was the second album, Struck Down. Similar, it's a white label, right? Really good shape. But yeah, if this got thrown out, that's all that we'd have is this.
That's
right?
amazing. I don't.
And as far as I know,
anything
as
in the
of right
States
now,
like that.
Those are the only 2 Y&T 8 tracks, even though it's very possible that like Earthshaker and Black Tiger might exist on 8 track. I've just never ever heard tell of them existing. Doesn't mean that they don't.
So this is the 8-track player that I have, a portable one, probably I would say more towards probably the end of the 8-track era. I mean, it looks...
I was going to say that looks relatively new.
Yeah, because if you had one from 1978, 79, and they used to have those big long sticks and like a handle you could punch.
Yeah, they were like a plunger.
Yeah, and now, we wanted one of those so bad. I remember.
I have tried a couple of these, and I don't think this thing works as good as it used to.
Yeah, and you got to demagnetize those heads on there.
All right, well,
right too.
It just clicked. So you can see here it's on 4.
Yep.
So I don't know if it's going to play or not. Well,
okay.
Is Josh about to have tape spaghetti, folks? We're going to find out.
And what people don't realize on those 8 tracks, where the little silver connector is that track it, that's where the tape is also connected together, right under that.
Oh, look at this.
When that would wear out, we'd have to tape them.
Yeah.
We hear nothing. Nothing. I can help it out. We're down here drinking some cider on the porch.
All right, so there you go. You got the first Rubicon.
Who were you playing?
Rubicon.
Oh my God, you actually put that in there?
I don't give a shit.
Well,
so you can see there's 2 different.
Okay,
one's blue, one's
I wonder if one's a club version or one. I don't know, but they did make different colored molds. Because I've had 2 different toys in the attic. One had a red casing and one had a black one. So
I would almost say the stickers are the same.
Yeah.
Don't see anything different with the stickers. It's just the
and the numbers are all the same on there.
Yep.
Maybe pressed in 2 different places or
Could
a different run or
And that's just what or it could have been they ran one tape and they had those cases left over and they just went ahead and filled them with those.
Yeah.
Now, see,
that's why it would be nice to have somebody from a label or from, like you said, RCA on that could tell you more about that.
See, I put this
that's my
in,
guess.
And they don't play, but this Whalen one, it plays perfectly.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I don't have the second record, and I'm not sure if I've ever seen it. I think maybe if I saw it, I would have bought it. American Dream. So you got that second Rubicon record out there. So if anybody's got it on 8-track, there you go. This is the place to put it in the comments or something. Because
that would be the rarer of the 2. Because I mean, I don't think either of those were that big, but I mean, the first one did have a minor hit.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking on Discogs, and I don't see an 8-track. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, because Discogs is only as good as what people enter in. I've entered
Right.
a lot of 8-tracks on there that weren't there before. So I think it's important to keep that stuff up to date. It's one of the reasons I did the book. And at the end, so the book, the chapters in the book go from 1981 to 1988. At the end of each of those years, there's a list of all known 8-tracks that exist only through the record club. So 1981 list is very short. That's because most major label albums were still being manufactured on 8-track for retail sale. Once you get to 83, you start to see some titles that, you know, people would go, "Wow, I didn't know that came out on 8-track." So I just thought, you know, all of this stuff, it's part of music history. It should be documented somehow, especially when you get up to 86, 87, 88. Like, the titles would just blow your mind that exist. It's like, this is crazy. Why does this coexist? Why do 8-tracks and CDs have this 4-year span where they coexisted? It doesn't make any sense.
No. And what's crazy is, if you look at some forums that people like what they collect, you know, you see the record platinum awards with the record on it, and the 8-track awards.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You know, it's lunacy.
Yeah, and each format, you couldn't just use, okay, here's the vinyl master for Kiss Rock and Roll Over. There's a different master for cassette. There's a different master for 8-track. They had to do a different process for CDs and the remastered ones. So yeah, the manufacturing costs, like for Columbia House from 86 to 88 in the US, you had 4 choices. You could get vinyl, cassette, 8-track, or CD, which is just weird. Like, I talked to one person on Instagram who said, yeah, my mom was in Columbia House in the 80s, and she kept forgetting to change her format choice. And she kept getting these albums on 8-tracks. So we don't even have an 8-track player anymore. I said, I bet you wish she'd have kept them. She said, yeah, I do.
Wow. Now, Tim, do you know, I mean, between America and Canada, said I have a couple Kiss 8-tracks from Canada. I got the cutout bin of the solo album for $1 a piece or whatever. But around the world, do you know how well 8-tracks were received around the world? Was it more something that was more Northern America?
It very much a North American thing, especially once the 80s came around. I've talked to people from the UK, and they'll say, oh, they died out in the mid 70s.
Yeah,
like
I never see them.
I barely remember them. You know, like if you you know, anybody that collects AC/DC, and you try to get all the formats, you can get those old Australian albums like TNT on 8-track. There's certain countries of the world like Germany, I think, but mostly it was mostly a North American thing for whatever reason. I think there are Japanese ones too, but I don't have that many foreign ones myself. I've got Led Zeppelin Presence from the UK. I've got the first Queen album from the UK. I've got Rainbow Rising from the UK. And you can, you know, whether it's even if US and Canada, they look way different, right? Like 8-tracks, cassettes are formats where they're so small, you can really tell just from looking at them where they came from, or whether they're retail or a club version, right?
Sure. Yeah, I just with all my collecting, and I'm going through eBay or wherever, I never see 8-tracks other than from Canada. I never see them from another country other than Canada and the USA.
It's very, very rare. Like, it definitely was a North American phenomenon. And like I said, Columbia House in Canada stopped making 8-tracks, and I've never seen one past 1984. I have Rush, Grace Under Pressure, Canadian 8-track. That's the only one that I have that is past, say, 1981, when they still would have come out in stores. I've never seen one past 1984 from Canada. That doesn't mean they didn't, but if they did, there weren't very many. So they did it must be a population thing.
Yeah.
So going back to Night Ranger 8-tracks, this right here.
Oh yeah,
California Jam 2. It's a double tape value, and on track 4 you got Rubicon, Never Gonna Leave, and Rubicon 2, Hot to Handle. So there you go. On
that is a Canadian 8-track. I can tell that immediately by looking at it.
Well, look at you go. It does say Canadian.
Because if that was the U.S. one, it would look like. Hold on. So just a quick difference between the U.S. and Canadian, one album after the other. So Journey Next, that's from Canada, and on below that is Infinity, and that's from the States. So that's what.
Is it just the color, or is there?
No, it's like it's
nothing on the back.
So this is white, and this is like a like a cream color or a yellow. So it's totally different. Like there's song titles.
Is there anything on the back of what's the back look like of those?
Well, see, because all the song titles are on the front of this, there's nothing on the back, and I would imagine that California Jam is the same.
That's why I was wondering.
Way. So this one, the cover art's a little bigger, and it's got all the song titles on the back.
So Canada only gave you one sticker. The U.S. gave you two.
Yeah.
You know what's crazy to me right now is we've got a Canadian and we've got an American, and you both technically have imports.
Yeah, that's true. Well, the other thing too is I live I live pretty close to the border. I grew up about 20 minutes away from the main border, and I had relatives over there. So I probably bought as many cassettes when I started buying music in the States as I did in Canada.
What part do you live in?
New Brunswick. So I'm way east.
Okay.
So those Rubicon albums, those would have come out, what, 78, 79?
Those were both 78.
Okay. So that's still when they would have been released to retail, and that's just your new album comes out. It comes out on vinyl. It comes out on 8-track. It comes out on cassette.
Yeah, it sounds like a computer to me.
This is probably because it's, I don't know, some jazz guy.
Yeah, I was thinking that too, Brent. I was it sounded like an Atari game.
Yeah.
That's some Santana.
Okay.
You have a nice 10.
Aerosmith.
Nope.
So you can actually see. It's actually a good one to do, like the tracks is actually working, but so there.
Yeah. So that was one of the little touches that we put into Unspooled, because you as you go through each chapter. So you're on chapter 1 of 1983, and it's lit up. So then when you go to chapter 2, it's lit up. And I did that for that very reason, because I knew people that would grew up with 8-track players would be like, oh, I see what they're doing there.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
There's little nuances.
I don't know, maybe it was your last episode I was on with you. We were talking about some of the 8-tracks, and I couldn't remember. I knew I had 7 Wishes, but I wasn't sure if I had Midnight Madness or Dawn Patrol, and you told me that I did have Dawn Patrol.
I remember seeing it because it stood out to me, because that's Dawn Patrol's one I don't have. And every copy of Dawn Patrol I've ever seen, if you hold up the spine of it there, Josh, it's got the title, big letters, and the name of the band in small. So you might think the name of the band was Dawn Patrol and the album was called Night Ranger for some reason.
If you look on some of the vinyl releases, and I bet you could probably go all the way through Man in Motion. Depending, there was 2 pressing plants for MCA, and one of them would print the album title in a little bit bigger font and have it on top and the band on bottom, and the other one would switch it. So they do the same thing on vinyl. So on this one here, you got just the sticker on the front.
Yeah, that's a Columbia House issue because it's got that blue border around the cover. And it has, I can tell by the way it's printed. It says CRC too, because Midnight Madness and 7 Wishes look very much the same, except as you'll see, Night Ranger's in the bold in the bigger print, and the album title's below. But every copy of Dawn Patrol I've ever seen is like that.
And
So
there you
yeah,
got
and even
the
down to what they
RC
look
there.
like on the back.
Yeah, and it's crazy because Josh's is a boardwalk.
Yeah, but like I
And
said,
those are
Columbia House
MCA.
made everything look
Same
like
format.
it would have been on CBS.
Yep.
So there's a spread in my book here where I'm talking about what they, what to look for. So here we have, so we've got Bryan Adams' Reckless and Night Ranger 7 Wishes. Those are both Columbia House issues. They both look very similar. Now, Bryan Adams is on A&M, and Night Ranger by now is on MCA. So the labels have nothing in common. But if the Columbia House puts you out, you're going to look generic and like everything else. And the other thing too is if you were on CBS Records, RCA Music Service isn't going to put your music out. Vice versa. If you're on RCA, like Columbia House division of CBS. So that's why you don't see, Columbia House tapes of like Hall & Oates or Eurythmics or Alabama.
They wouldn't give each other the rights to them then.
Yeah, but if you're, like MCA and A&M and Atlantic and Polygram, those were like neutral labels. So it is possible, like that Hank Jr. Major Moves 8-track that Josh held up. That's what the RCA Music Service version of Midnight Madness looks like. So this is Columbia. The RCA ones looked very, very different. Just find a quick one here. Another like later 80s one. So this is 38 special strength in numbers from 86. This is an RCA Music Service version. Very different than what a Columbia House one would look like. So Midnight Madness would look like more like this, the RCA Music version, except it might have a black casing.
So track one, program one would be on this is Don't Tell Me You Love Me, followed by Can't Find Me a Thrill.
Yeah, already we're off.
Yep.
Yeah.
Those are the first two tracks on each side, the record and cassette, with the beginning of Play Rough, so that acoustic part. Program 2, Play Rough Conclusion, Call My Name, and Night Ranger. Program 3, Sing Me Away, Young Girl in Love, and Eddie's Coming Out Tonight, the beginning. And then program 4, Eddie's Coming Out Tonight, conclusion. At Night She Sleeps, and closes out with Penny.
So yeah, so anybody watching, if you know the track listing inside and out, that is, it's like they put it on shuffle.
It's random play.
That's because they wanted the programs to be as even as possible, so that you don't have like 3 minutes of space at the end of one program. So if you like, I can read the Midnight Madness.
Well, let's see if this fucker plays.
All right. I could tell. Oh yeah, I get to both of these Midnight Madness and 7 Wishes. The track listings are mangled.
Yeah, and when he said they had, I remember most.
Yeah, I can't get this one to play.
Most would only interrupt one track where it would continue on the next track. He read off 2 tracks. Yeah. I was like, wow.
Or you might even have a situation where if they have enough room, one song will be repeated.
Yeah.
And if you're lucky, it's a song that they split in half that you can get whole.
Well,
so
before I forget, I want to throw this out here, so I don't have very many 8-track players, but my grandpa, who was a big George Jones fan, I remember going over to his house. It's probably been 7-8 years ago, and he was down in the basement looking for something. And when he came upstairs, asked, well, what are you looking for? And he was looking for this George Jones 8-track because it had 2 songs on it that he didn't have it on anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And now I was eventually able to find a box set out of Germany, because country western music from the 50s and 60s is huge over in Europe because of Armed Forces Network radio. So Germany releases a lot of this old 50s and 60s stuff. But anyways, it was just weird that he was looking for this 8-track because it was the only place he knew that contained
almost like bonus tracks now, right?
Yeah,
like you got to get a
correct.
certain version to get all the songs.
Yeah. So what's the programming on Midnight Madness?
All right. Well, it starts off, if you can still rock in America, but then right away it goes to Let Him Run. So it goes from the first song to the last song. Why Does Love Have to Change? Beginning. Program 2, Why Does Love Have to Change? Conclusion. When You Close Your Eyes, Chipping Away. Program 3 is Touch of Madness and Passion Play. And program 4 is Rumors in the Air and Sister Christian. So I guess the best thing I can say about this is that there's only one song that's split, but as you've heard, like the track listing is completely shot, right? 7 Wishes. Program 1 is 7 Wishes, Interstate Love Affair, I Need a Woman, Beginning. Program 2, I Need a Woman, Conclusion. 4 in the Morning, Night Machine. Program 3, This Boy Needs to Rock, I Will Follow You, Goodbye, Beginning. And program 4, Goodbye, Conclusion, Faces. And it all ends with Sentimental Street. Like
now I got 2 copies of it, so I can trade you one of these for your Midnight Madness, and then I will be set. I don't think there's any.
You don't have that. It's not the same version. Or Midnight Madness.
I don't. Well, I don't care if you have 2. I just need that Midnight Madness.
Okay, Josh, that slipcase there.
Uh-huh.
That is a regular CBS. That's how all my Loverboy 8-tracks came when I bought them in the store.
That's a CBS, and the Columbia House ones would look a lot like that too.
Did they?
Because it was all the division of the same.
Yeah. But I totally remember that, and I used to keep the cellophane on them. I just cut it. I've always been an anal kid,
And I don't see any difference in, either of these. Like, they're both CRCs.
The same pressings, aren't they?
Yeah, there's nothing different with them.
Yeah. For some reason, this is really, really weird. If you're trying to collect Night Ranger 8-tracks, you're most likely to come across 7 Wishes, which, because it's the most recent one, it should be the hardest one to find. Dawn Patrol is by far the hardest one to find, but I think it's because you had that label shift from Boardwalk to MCA, and there just weren't that many copies made. So I don't even think there's such a thing. Like, I don't know. I think every copy of Dawn Patrol on 8-track would be Boardwalk. I don't think once they signed to MCA that they that Columbia House would have reissued it. It's possible they did, but I've never seen one. That's one of my grails as far as.
Hold on. Work, damn it.
I'm just waiting for the spaghetti. I don't know.
I know. It's just not worth it. It's just not worth it.
Especially the Dawn Patrol one. That would be like,
we can't hear it anyway.
No.
It's just I want the fucker to play. Anyways, it played
you
for
need the one with the plunger.
But but that's just the thing. Like, Night Ranger is a good example. That's not a band that you think of when you think of the 8-track era. And that's why that's what I wanted to capture in this book, the fact that these things do exist. It doesn't make sense that they exist, but they do. I've got one picture in here that's got a bunch of later 80s releases, just to kind of drive home the fact that, you've got these iconic albums that you think of as being, 80s. You do not think of 8-tracks as being anything bright and shiny in 80s, right? You think of them as old and musty and moldy. But so when you see some of the later 80s albums on 8-track, here we go. So recognize some of these titles.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Jackson, Bad. I mean, you get Prince, you get Madonna, you get the Cocktail soundtrack, Journey's Greatest Hits, which I now have. I didn't have it at the time this came out, but Journey's Greatest Hits and Fleetwood Mac Greatest Hits both came out November 15th, 1988. Those are supposedly the last 2 albums manufactured by a major label on 8-track. So
really,
now I saw somewhere. Let me see here if it will pull up, but it was on one of these many pages that I'm a member of. They showed Fleetwood Mac's greatest hits.
Mm-hmm.
on 8-track, and they said that it was the last produced 8-track, maybe for I don't know if it was for that label or what, but they made mention that it was, and I'm not a member of an 8-track club, so it was just a regular music club, but they had mentioned that was like the last one that
well, so that one and Journey's Greatest Hits both were released the same day. So
all right, here's what I saw. The last 8-track offered by a record label in mass production was Fleetwood Mac's Greatest Hits in 1988. So maybe there were some after that, but this was like one they produced.
I don't think so. I think what they're getting at is that those were the last ones that were run off, and I know of no others from later on in 88 and none from 89. Like, I think that's when they finally said, okay, we're done with these. Like, it must have just been diminishing sales to the point where, it's just not worth it for us to keep making these things.
Well, and probably the older the cars got, people were getting newer cars that had the cassette decks in them at the time.
Yeah. Well, my understanding too, and I'm going to grab another one here, is that they got kind of cheap with the way that they just kind of slapped the stickers on. Like, here's a couple of more recent 8-tracks. Mm-hmm. So that's from 1987. They just slapped this sticker on here. Printing's really small. And then finally did get this. The sticker's on crooked.
Well, they there was nothing. They weren't on the shelf, so they had no shelf appeal, and they really didn't care how they were going out.
Just here, take them, right?
Yeah.
But yeah. But the other thing that comes to mind, and I do have a chapter in the book dedicated to this, like these what ifs. So people might be thinking, well, Tim, you're sitting here saying they made them all the way up to 1988. Why don't we see Big Life and Man in Motion? Well, there's a lot of reasons for that. Man in Motion is highly unlikely because we're into September 88 now. It wasn't a big selling album. So the chances of them, like the label, even bothering to going to the record clubs and saying, hey, can you run off a few of these, are very, very slim. Big Life is more of a possibility. That was a gold selling album, but I always kind of, until I see it, I'm not going to say it exists, but I cannot definitively say that it doesn't. For example, this isn't 100, Sammy Hagar solo isn't that different than Night Ranger, really, like as far as like your audience, right? So if this exists, of course it's possible that Big Life might exist, but I've never seen it.
And it doesn't say I never said goodbye on it, does it? I mean, I've only seen a handful of regular copies that say that on there.
Yeah. And again, taking liberties with the cover art, the way that his name's printed on there, I've never seen that anywhere else. So, but yeah. So I do have some what ifs in here that could exist, but I strongly doubt that they do. But in the Night Ranger world, you've got the 2 Rubicon, the Rubicon songs on California Jam. You got the first 3 Night Ranger. I don't even know if the Teacher's soundtrack exists on 8-track. People have asked about it, but no one has ever been able to present a picture to say that yes, it does. I mean, it doesn't. It makes sense that it would. A lot of soundtrack,
and I don't recall seeing it
in 1984. There's a lot.
It's very rare, even on CD.
Tim, you know why that Sammy Hagar is printed on there like that, don't you? Because that album cover didn't have anything printed on it.
That's right. It originally came out. It had no title.
Yeah, it was a sticker. Yeah. It was just a clear sticker on it.
Yeah.
So that's why they did that, I'm sure.
Yeah. So there were a lot of soundtracks that came out in 1984 on 8-track. I'm just looking through here, like Beverly Hills Cop, Breakin', Footloose, Ghostbusters, Indiana Jones, The Temple of Doom, The Woman in Red, Against All Odds, Metropolis. So now I don't see any Capitol soundtracks on 8-track. So maybe that's, it might come down to what label that it was on too. I don't know. I'm just trying to think if there was anything else that Night Ranger was on that might be. I don't think the Secret of My Success soundtrack came on an 8-track or Out of Bounds. I guess that would be it, wouldn't it? Explorers.
Well, you know what? Hang on a second. The Out of Bounds I've got right here. And back then they used to also say available on cassette. 8, you know what I mean? It would tell you the other
but
format.
If it was by 1986, it probably wouldn't say 8-track unless it was a club version.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're right.
But again, anything's possible. Like the material in this book is to the best of my knowledge. If somebody had said to me, I remember seeing such and such an 8-track, I'd be like, that's nice, but until I see proof, I'm not going to put it in one of these lists because I don't want false information out there. Like if somebody said, I'm pretty sure if somebody had Cinderella Night songs on 8-track, and I'm like, that's nice, I want to see a picture of it.
Yeah. So I went through eBay and pulled up some of the most expensive 8-tracks that have sold. So you guys may want to go through some of your 8-track collection, because if you have Rat, Invasion of Your Privacy.
Oh, I don't have that.
Give me a guess what that sold for.
I bet you it would be at least 300.
It sold for $455.99 with $9 shipping.
And here's the thing, guys. Like, you might be out there thinking that's ridiculous, but when is the last time you saw a Rat 8-track?
Mm-hmm.
And also, I might add, there's an example. There's a good example of a band where there's a skip, because you can get the EP on 8-track.
Really?
But not out of the cellar. The one that came in between.
So now this is sealed, okay? Black Sabbath Live Evil.
Yeah.
What do you think it sold for?
That'd be 200 or so, 150.
Now, I think they accepted the best offer, but it was going for $459.
Wow.
And it sold.
And you got to be careful too, because it's very easy to reseal things. We all know that, right?
Now, this one's not sealed, but just what you said, the first Rat EP.
Yeah.
Give me a price on it.
That would be more than Invasion, I'm thinking.
That's $600.
450.
Yeah. Okay.
Now you had this in the book, and here's the Columbia House, packaging.
Okay. Even though there wouldn't be many of them, there'd be more of those than there would be the Rat ones. So I'm going to say that's probably in the 150, 200 range.
I don't know if it's I don't know if it's sealed or not. It doesn't say that it is, but it went for $439.
Wow. Maybe it must have been sealed.
Now, Tim, you were talking about easy to reseal.
Yeah.
Now, on the Columbia houses, because I remember as a kid, when you bought them in the store, it was a thicker cellophane, and everything was like heat sealed, like the folded. It was folded and heat sealed in the corners.
Yeah.
Whereas they started, putting them through the regular thing and hitting it with the gun, and it would just be kind of like, I don't know. It would the material wasn't as thick.
Right. Yeah. It was
like you get on a record now.
Yeah.
So
Josh just held up Boston Third Stage.
Now that's an MCA release, and it is an RCA record company.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we know at least MCA is doing 86 at least.
Can you hold? Well, no, RCA. That's an RCA Music Service issue of an MCA album.
Correct. What I'm saying is we're 1 year behind Big Life.
Yes. Oh, yes, absolutely. So that's what the RCA music version of that. I have the Columbia House version, and this is what it looks like. It's better. It's actually got graphic on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you're right. I've got. Hold on, I should have dug some of these out. I'm sorry.
So
I've got right around the time Third Stage came out. So I've got this Kansas Power.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't, it's on MCA, but it's an RCA Music Service version. So yeah, Big Life, it could, it's just that I would think we'd have seen one by now.
Yeah, I've never seen one, and I've seen pretty much almost everything. This went for $250.
The Third Stage?
Yeah. AC/DC, Fly on the
Oh,
Wall.
Fly on the Wall. Yeah, yeah. Fly on the Wall and Who Made Who are the two that I don't have.
$223.
I got them up to flick of the switch, but
Quiet
yeah,
Riot,
condition critical. Yeah,
$200.
yeah. You're noticing there's a lot of rock there, right? A lot of hard rock. Yeah.
Well, you got a lot of collectors. I mean, we're all a bunch of nerds. Now I did see where Dolly Parton released a Christmas album on 8-track back in 2020.
Yeah.
So you got that there. There's
the band Ghost put out one of their albums on 8-track, I think.
Which I think Robin may have. Let me ask her.
I got to plug you in because I'm about ready to die. My computer is.
So
not sure what it is.
So Cheap Trick released one in 2009, something like that.
Yes, they did. The latest.
So did it come looking shitty already?
Well, the copy I got, I didn't get it when it came out, but mine's pretty smooth. But it looks like they did, because if you look the way this is written here, that's what Capitol used to use on their 8-tracks. It looks like they just repurposed, or maybe they wanted it to look like the Beatles. Maybe that's why it looks like.
Well, that looks a little bit Beatleish on the back.
Yeah,
but I can see like the ripples on the back. Looks like there's a couple of ripples in the sticker. I don't know if it actually is, but
very, very, very small. I think it's the light that shows them up. But,
so there's an 8-track from 2009.
Now, there's one that I'd like to have is Alice Cooper live at the AstroTurf from 2018. That came out on 8-track in a limited run, but I don't have that one.
Now, the one thing I remember when it came to 8-tracks was kind of like what I was talking about with my grandpa wanting that George Jones 8-track because it had those rare songs on there, was Pink Floyd.
Yeah, I know exactly where you're going with this.
A lot of people go after I think it's the Animals 8-track because there's an extended solo by Snowy White.
Yeah, and it's only on the 8-track version, and I think it was just to fill up. It was probably to even up the programs, which is pretty. Yeah, that's a highly sought after one for like Pink Floyd fans that, again, don't necessarily collect 8-tracks, right? And I don't collect these things to collect them. I collect the bands that I like, and I like to get all the formats if I can. That's the thing. It's not just a matter of collecting these 8-tracks. So I am kind of fascinated by just the fact that they exist, and some of the bands that do exist, like you said, Rat on 8-track, like Shout at the Devil is on 8-track. The first Bon Jovi is on 8-track. It's crazy. Some of these bands that started just soon enough to get in on the 8-track thing. Striper, To Hell with the Devil came out on 8-track. So it's not a cheap hobby, but the nice thing about it is there is a finite amount. Eventually there's only so many that I'm after. There's only so many that exist, but it's fun. It's fun talking to people about it and educating, because a lot of people are like, oh no, they stopped making 8-tracks in the late 70s. It's like, no, I got Night Ranger, I got Def Leppard, I got, these bands
and the majority of 8-tracks are still worthless.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's not like there's like the vinyl resurgence. There's no 8-track resurgence. It's just that people that have held on to them for many years, I think they now have a greater understanding of what they've got and what it could be worth to someone. Like, if you're a Springsteen fan, the box set, the live box set from '85, that came out on 8-track. It's on 4 tapes. It's the only box set that came out on 4 formats. Tunnel of Love is on 8-track. So if you're a hardcore Springsteen collector, those are the ones that you want to get. And you want to get Born in the USA. And
I don't know exactly where I have it, but I have a Elvis box set on 8-track. So the box, it's just like a regular box, like you would get with CDs. It's got the Elvis and all the designs and everything, and you open it up, and there's a plastic tray with 3 8-tracks on there. but because I still, if I go to a thrift store or something, you'll still find just 8 tracks, and usually it's someone they're still in the case, the big old, briefcase, and you'll go through them, and I mean, you'll find some rock bands you like, but it's
you don't
usually
find, you don't find, you tend to find a lot of disco. You find a lot of easy listening.
a lot of
You find
Carpenters.
a lot of Carpenters, a lot of old country ones, a lot of counterfeit ones, like ones that it'll say like Deep Purple Machine Head, but it's not the right cover and there's no label information on it. Well, that's a counterfeit.
Yeah.
Because just like cassettes, it was easy to dub something onto an 8-track, right? So
I mean, really, the ones that you're wanting are the ones that really after probably the 80s or after
pretty much.
19,
I mean,
and you're wanting rock or some pop, and the later in the 80s you go, probably the better you are, because there's less of them there.
Yeah, exactly. Which again, that's another reason why it's odd that the easiest Night Ranger one to find is the most recent 7 Wishes. That's the one you're most likely to see, which doesn't make any sense. But
The only thing I can think of is Boardwalk goes out. By the time MCA is getting everything going with Midnight Madness, which they released on 8-track, they're doing 7 Wishes, and 7 Wishes is a monster record, and they're just probably printing that stuff off left and right. So I'm going to bring Rock and Robin on, because she actually has some newer 8-tracks. So
all right,
we'll get her on real quick. And
when I want to tell you guys, my cord evidently has a short in it, so if I drop out, I didn't hang up on you. I was trying to run and find another one. So I apologize.
Rock and Robin shows these 8-tracks.
So I have 4 that I've gotten through like thrift stores or whatever, just because I like the band kind of, and I've tried to play 2 of them. They don't work.
Well, that's the story of all mine.
Pretty much.
Yeah, Josh has been trying to play his tonight to limited success.
He could have said they worked. We couldn't hear them anyway.
So I actually have a portable 8-track player too. So I thought that was pretty cool. That's why I've tried to like play them on.
That looks like a Rolodex.
Kind of. It's heavy. It's portable. Like, I can't imagine. It's heavier than a purse.
Let's see that new Ghost one.
I'll show you that. It's still sealed. It's their 4th album prequel, whichever.
Oh, they didn't even put it in the slipcase.
I think I got it like in a box with like the vinyl and CD and all that. And then here's the back with the track listing.
What's the spine look like?
It's black and it says Ghost Prequel. And the fun thing with this is that when you ordered it, you either got yellow, white, or black. Or you got one of 3 colors you couldn't pick. So I got the yellow one. Is that?
Now, on the back, the programming, are any of the songs like cut in half?
Yeah, are they in the right order? Or?
They are in the right order. I don't think any are would help if I had my microphone. I don't think any songs are missing as well. They're all in order, yeah.
All right.
And it's directly from like the Ghost site or whatever.
So there we go. Ghost might lead a resurgence in the 8-track.
Wow. Do you recall?
Well, that's the other thing I wonder too. Like when when bands put, it's like that Cheap Trick one. It's like, has anyone actually ever listened? Is there anything on there, or did they just say, "Here it is on 8-track"?
Well, that's what I need to get these. Because we were talking about with the Pink Floyd having the differences. I can't remember. I've heard other people say that there's been different mixes on 8-track, on 8-track versions, and it's like I need to get these Night Ranger ones played and see if there's anything different on there. I'm actually quite surprised Kiss has never done any of the 8-track thing. I mean, with all the limited edition stuff they do,
well, they could have so much fun putting out Sonic Boom and the Monster and whatever.
And what's crazy is like Tobias Forg of Ghost. That's how you pronounce his last name, by the way. The E is silent.
No,
He
wrong.
loves Kiss. Like he grew up on Judas Priest, Kiss, all of that, and like you can totally like I have all these autograph tattoos, and he asked me like who they are. I'm like Joe Elliott, and like Judas Priest. He's like, that's so cool. I'm honored. He like he grew up with the best, and he's a huge fan, so it makes sense.
Until you got a
Ghost
fans
will do
of,
it.
until you got a fans of motion autograph tat, you really don't have anything. But all right, so let's
Hold on, I got a question for Tim real quick.
Yeah.
Go easy.
Now no, you may or may not know this because I don't know the answer. But back when Spinal Tap released "Break Like the Wind,"
yeah.
do you remember all the promotional stuff they released for that?
There wasn't actually anything on. I think they just
on the 8-track,
existing 8-tracks and put. As far as I can remember, they weren't even really careful at how they put the sticker over top of whatever.
Okay,
it was.
I had never held one of them. I've seen it.
Yeah.
Because I know they also released a colander instead of a calendar. Because I remember one of our local record stores had both of them in, and I begged them for them. They wouldn't, but they still have.
I laughed. I still think I can still remember the ad that I saw for that album that came out in '92, and the quote, I think it was from Nigel Tufnell. It said something like, "We're back. Come back with us. Join us, won't you?" In the consumer sense.
It was probably one of the best tours I've ever seen in my life.
Well, I got my Rufus here wants to go out. So,
all right, Brent, you got anything else for Tim?
No, Tim, I appreciate you coming on.
This is awesome. Thanks.
That was so cool talking.
All right, Tim. Where can they get the Unspooled at? Amazon?
Amazon, yeah. It's originally I self-published it, but it's on Amazon now. Wherever you call home, just your Amazon.ca or .com or in Australia or whatever. And I've actually got another book that just came out, but we're not here to talk about that one just yet. I did mention the band earlier.
And there is a Night Ranger connection with it.
There is a Night Ranger mentioned in the book too, just very briefly, because it's one of those bands that have multiple singers. So,
what's the book about? What band?
Well, I'll just hold it up real quick. What I've got right now is the proof copy. Like, it just came out as we're filming this. Y&T. Down for the Count, the Y&T album review. This is not as graphics intensive as Unspooled is, but this is a panel discussion, album by album. One of the most overlooked bands, even more overlooked than Night Ranger, because they never even had a gold album. But hoping this will get people listening to them. And Night Ranger's mentioned in here because
who did the cover? Who did the cover art there?
Well, the same man that did the cover for Man in Motion, Mr. Hugh Syme, did. I actually was able to secure his talents for this. Of course, I mean, I'm a huge Rush fan, and he's like the Rush guy. But he's done,
That's very cool.
Whitesnake, Megadeth, Bon Jovi, New Jersey, Whitesnake. I think I said Whitesnake already, but yeah, I mean, he's
Survivor and Whitesnake. So he's
Def Leppard retroactive.
Whitesnake.
He did Whitesnake. He did Coverdale Page even. Yeah,
David Coverdale was in Whitesnake. So there we go, guys. Go to Amazon, type in Unspooled, an adventure in 8 tracks by Tim Durling. Purchase it. It's very cool. I mean, all these photos we were kind of shown on my phone. He's got them all in there. He's got all the lists. Go dig through your shit, see what you got. You may have $500 sitting there.
Yeah.
But
Tim, you got a
Tim,
Dawn Patrol 8-track you just can't stand to have, let me know.
Or hey,
you'll even pay the exchange fee for the border.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah. Oh, I'm used to that.
Well, Tim, thanks for joining us. We hope to see you again, buddy.
Thanks for having me on.